activates body heat, reduces muscle fatigue, and burns off more calories. Get your TC1 gel now. Go to tc1gel.com and use the code RADIO30 for a 30% discount on this amazing product. Again, RADIO30 is a code for 30% off the regular low price of TC1 gel. You can also go to www.tc followed by the numeral 1 gel.com. That's TC number 1 gel.com. TC1gel.com. Get rid of a few inches and get your abs back with TC1 Gel. Also, follow them on Instagram, handle TC1 Gel.
Continued concern this morning over the measles outbreak in this country. Federal health officials are now monitoring measles cases in a dozen states.
The CDC has confirmed nearly 230 cases of the disease over the past 10 weeks. Outbreaks have been reported in New York, Illinois, Texas, Washington, and California. The CDC says the cases are linked to unvaccinated Americans traveling to countries like Israel and the Ukraine that are experiencing large measles outbreaks. The disease spreads quickly, prompting some lawmakers to call for making the MMR vaccine mandatory. Mark Mayfield, NBC News Radio.
Kentucky lawmakers want the national motto of the United States displayed in all of the Commonwealth's public schools. House Bill 46 would require all public elementary and secondary schools to display "In God We Trust" in a prominent place. The bill easily passed through a Senate committee on Monday. If it becomes law, the motto would have to go up by the start of the next school year in an entryway, cafeteria, or common area where students are likely to see it. Los Angeles International Airport is getting ready to break ground Thursday for its new automated people mover.
The more than 2-mile-long project looks to cut down on congestion caused by cars driving in and out of the area. Stephanie Sampson with LAX says the nearly $5 billion needed to design and construct the system will be paid for up front by Lynx.
So they are providing the financing up front, and then we as an airport will pay back through milestone payments and availability payments, utilizing passenger fees and bonds.
The electric trains are expected to operate every 2 minutes, carrying up to 200 people per train. It's projected to open in early 2023. James Rojas, NBC News Radio.
And air pollution is actually killing more people than smoking. German researchers say pollution caused around 8.8 million deaths in 2015, nearly double the previously estimated 4.5 million. The World Health Organization estimates that smoking kills around 7 million people a year. Lisa Carter, NBC News Radio.
Express 106.5 FM. The #1 FM talk radio station in the Inland Empire. KCAA, the station that leaves no listener behind. Express 106.5 FM. Welcome to U-Turn Radio. Here at U-Turn Radio, we believe in big-hearted communities and small government. Join your hosts, Nadia Renner, Tom Murphy, and Eric Steinman, as we work to put local governments on a diet and champion the charities that support your community. So come on, join us and let's turn it around.
Welcome to U-Turn Radio. Happy Thursday, beautiful day in the neighborhood. It's been raining today. We got clear skies, beautiful day. Eric is joining us via telephone. Eric, welcome.
Yes, thank you.
And Tom is right next to me.
Yeah,
hey, Tom.
Yes, I am, and it's good to see the first breath of spring.
Absolutely, I agree 100%. We have a great show today, very informative, this show is going to be really good.
It kind of set off a little bit with some prior planning, but there's a CNN article that this week that kind of plays into this pretty well.
Helped it put all together. And then last week we had a great show as well. If you missed last show, we talked about the history here in the Inland Empire. So go ahead and go to uturnradio.com to check out all the other radio shows that we have covered here in the Inland Empire. But today we have, the show title is China versus the Inland Empire. Is business with China played on a level field? What does that mean, Tom?
Well, let me start out with a little bit of a disclaimer or bridge building, if you will. This is not a question of race. This is not a question on the Chinese race. This is the issue is the difference in how two separate governments approach the businesses that operate out of their countries. And the question on the table is it a level playing field? Is it more or less equal between businesses that are American businesses conducting business in America and businesses that are Chinese businesses that are conducting business in America or in China?
Right.
That makes sense? Yeah. It's just with the modern day, Twitter conversation, I wanted to start out with this isn't about race. This is about business.
Right. This is definitely about business and more like business ethic, I would say, maybe.
Yeah.
Like comparing one and the other.
Yeah.
So I would say maybe that. But however, here at U-Turn Radio, if this is your first time listening, we get to spin for charity when you call in. You can call in 909-792-5222. So pretty much if you know of a charity or you work for a charity, you call in and we spin, and whatever it lands on, that's what the money that will be donated to your favorite charity. And it could be from hundreds to thousands of dollars. We've given out a few $1,000s.
Yep. I got my spinner ready. Except the volume's not.
Except that it's not going on. All right. But it's here, and we'll spin for it.
And
So
we'll get it straightened out by the time you call.
I hope so, Tom, because it looks like you're in Las Vegas right now with that spinner. All right, let's get into it. So where do you want to start, Tom? You want to?
Well, let me kind of launch off with kind of reviewing the CNN story, and then we'll kind of segue into that with our guest. And our guest interview today is actually our co-host, Eric Steinman, because this directly intersects with his business. So the CNN story was. Have you heard the name Huawei lately in the news?
You know what? I didn't hear of it, but when I saw the logo, I'm like, oh, I've seen that. And like the airport, like I've seen it in different places.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Huawei is a telecommunications company it's a Chinese company. And much of their equipment is on cell towers, spread all over the nation. The particular issue with the CNN story was there's like this graphic that on CNN, and there's it's a Google Earth satellite view, and it's like missile silo here, cell tower here, and it's like 1/3 of a mile away. And the concern is there's like 100 or more missile sites, spread over Montana in that area. And these are nuclear missile sites, right? So, the bubble goes up, all these things come pouring out, and the whole world, burns up and explodes, that type of thing. So, also spread out amongst the missile silos are a large number of cell towers. Turns out, towers, particularly in rural areas, are equipped with equipment supplied by Huawei or ZTE, which are both Chinese telecommunication companies. And so our government, there's this perceived threat that, they can, via electronic warfare, cyber hacking, all that thing, they could turn off phones. They could tell what people are doing by hacking into their phone. They can scramble data going to the phone. They can block calls. The Chinese government could do this in America.
They can pretty much track anything that a phone user is doing.
That's
type of thing.
That's the concern.
Gotcha.
Now I'm not tech savvy enough to know if the Chinese government is actually doing that via Huawei ZTE equipment, but that's the concern. So now we're gonna bring in our quote guest, our co-host Eric. Eric is his day job is he's the development manager for NTCH, which is a telecommunications company, and he's built cell towers all over the nation. And he has installed some of this equipment. So we're going to get his perspective on, a couple of questions like, why'd you use Chinese equipment? what's the difference in terms of his support or lack of support from our government as compared to support or lack of support that the Chinese companies get from their government?
Right. Before we go on to Eric, we'll go ahead and put that article on Twitter and our social media. You can go to @uturn_radio, and we'll put that article, that CNN, the one that we're using as information, so that you guys can look at it. So Eric, you're into this field. This is, like Tom said, what you do, your day job. How long have you been doing this for?
We used to be a construction company, just building sites, if you will, back from about 1996 through 1999. In 1999, became part of another company that we actually did more than just construction. We bought spectrum from the government and radio equipment and went into different parts of the country and put up our own full networks, our own stores, our own customer care, everything that a Sprint or Verizon would do, but on a smaller scale. And we grew fairly large, where we were doing, NFL cities like St. Louis and Jacksonville, further along in about the 2010, 2011 time frame. And then recently we've gone back to just building. We build mainly for AT&T and T-Mobile. After our government gave a lot of our customers free phones and service provided by this purported second richest guy in the world from Mexico, and that's a whole discussion for a different day. But we were, in fact, as far as the subject matter today, we probably got the right people and the right person to talk to, because I was the principal person on the equipment deal, where we were the first customer in the United States for both of the Chinese manufacturers of telecommunication gear, Huawei and ZTE, both of which companies have made the news recently for lying to the United States government about principally providing support for the government in Iran, that type of stuff, taking our technology and shipping it to Iran, but telling them they weren't, that type of stuff. So that's a little bit of a time frame on it. And
so you made a business decision to go ahead and use, and not only use, but first one apparently to market using Chinese equipment. Why'd you make that choice?
I'd like to say the choice was made for us. We started out in this using American-made Lucent technologies. That used to be that's the name they changed from Bell Labs, which was part of AT&T before they broke it up. Made in Basking Ridge, New Jersey, by Americans, and that was our technology of choice when we launched all our initial network. And we put it in. It was fine. The government, recurring theme here, of ill thought out stuff that the government mandates, usually by some people with very little experience. But they required us to put in 3 government mandates, which were E911, which is location-based emergency call-in, and the 911 dispatcher can tell kind of where you are, with 100 feet or something initially it was, on a wireless phone. They used to always be able to do that on a landline phone because there was an address attached to the landline phone. They didn't move around, but a little bit more difficult with a wireless phone. But they put a mandate in that you had to be able to do that by a certain date, some year out from when they mandated that. They also mandated that we provide what they called CALIA functionality, which allowed law enforcement to tap into our network, supposed to be with a court order, and generally it was. The court order, they could tap into our network in a certain way, in a standard way, so that our networks were the same as everyone else in the country for them to tap into. And The other, let's see, it was local number portability, the E911 in Korea. The other thing was local number portability, and that allowed you to take your home phone number, for instance, and port that to your cell phone. All those things are valid government, requests or desires, and they'd like to see them happen. The problem comes in when you mandate that the companies are going to do that, but you don't provide any funding to make that happen. You say you're going to do it. And our technology provider at that time, Lucent Technologies, saw that as a huge opportunity to charge us more to implement those technologies, which they were doing for all their other customers, Verizon and whatnot across the country. They're to charge us more just to implement those technologies by about 4 times than we paid for all the equipment in our network. It's in the tens of millions of dollars just to implement those technologies, which we didn't have, being a small company kind of just starting out at that time. And lo and behold, in wrestling with what we're going to do here and complaining and saying, hey, look, we don't got the money and this ain't right, and you sold us the spectrum, we paid you for it to get into business here, you should have told us then. Along came the Chinese and said, hey, we will replace all your equipment for a fraction of the cost of implementing these technologies, and we'll provide you those technologies, and we'll make sure those technologies are always provided to you in the future in case your government mandates anything. And they had pretty good equipment, and it was, with the cost of their equipment, we could expand our networks quite a bit faster, and we had no real choice in the matter. Didn't stop us from going to the government. In this case, we went to where our headquarters was at that time in Hermosa Beach, California. We went to the representative, Jane Harmon, for that area, who was in Congress and sat on the, I think, intelligence, if there is such a thing in government, intelligence subcommittee. And we told her that we have to do it, and we have to do it for this reason, because you and the federal government are mandating us. But we think this is a really dumb idea, and this is in 2003, approximately. We think this is a really dumb idea to allow the Chinese come over here and provide phone networks, because there's all kinds of things you can do with the phone network, and we nor you are going to know just what they can and will do with it. It's complicated electronic equipment. The government now is complaining about all kinds of backdoors into that equipment, and that's exactly what we told them was a possibility at that time, and why we thought this was a dumb idea, that it was a much better idea to either talk sense into Lucent to give us reasonable pricing or help us out with the cost of it if they don't, or something along that line. That wasn't, the government mulled it over for a few weeks and actually came back to us and asked us if we were going to China and if they could send somebody with us.
They wanted to send you guys to China?
They wanted to know if we were going to China, and if it was, I believe the CIA wanted to send somebody with us to China, which would have made us spies, I believe, and we promptly told them we were not going to China and never were going to China from that point on. so given that they thought that was, so that's just how lame it was, to be honest with you. So
kind of a combination of, if you will, corporate greed on Lucent's part. Here's this regulation that they're now going to use to, smash their customers.
Right, we're going to use it to make money. They thought it was a huge revenue-making thing, but not being short-sighted in that they lost all our business because of that, because they tried to be abusive. We thought in that thing they lost all our business. It was a bad day for them. It was a bad day for us. Right. Because we went down the road with the Chinese people, and we were, in fact, the first customer for both those Chinese companies here in the U.S.
Given the substantial disparity in pricing, do you believe that the Chinese, that Huawei and ZTE were getting, if you will, help from their government in terms of that would bring their pricing down?
Certainly, they didn't. So they tried to appear like they were competing, and this is an important thing to realize on how our companies are competing with their governments. They present the appearance that they're competing as they're a company like a company would be here in the U.S., and the people that are making decisions here in the U.S. don't look at it very deeply. So Huawei, for instance, presented themselves as an employee-owned company, and they were ran by an entrepreneur. Well, the entrepreneur was a former officer in the Chinese army, and he certainly didn't just turn up with an idea, I want to start a huge international telecommunication company. It will compete with, for instance, Lucent Technologies that has been, working on this stuff for 40 or 50 years. He didn't come up with the idea that he would just start a huge company, and within a couple of years it would be up and running and competing with a huge company like that. Logic would dictate that he was, put up to the whole thing, and he was, somebody that was connected with them in that way. So that's the profile that was given to us of Huawei Technologies. They were an entrepreneurial company, employee-owned. But now you got to look a little bit under that to see how they become employee-owned, because there could be, I could try to start a company that would compete with GM here in the United States and not having the, name recognition of Elon Musk or something like that. Probably wouldn't get very far. And at any rate, in order to do that, you have to buy a whole lot of stuff. You have to have a whole lot of credit. You got to show people you know what you're doing, and then the investors and the banks come and invest money with you. And if you really are good and you really can prove it to people and you got a good idea, you can go around and take your idea and move it forward here with other people's money. Or you can be independently wealthy and you can go do it yourself. But if you're not that, and certainly this guy in China was not purported to be that, you have to go raise money and you have to do it slowly. You can't go from 0 to 100 in no seconds as a company like this went. So here's how they became an employee-owned company, and this was from discussions with them. The banks in China are basically controlled by the government, and the government has chosen certain industries that they want to target, one of them being telecommunications. In order to get a company up to speed in telecommunications, they needed not only to fund it, but if they funded it totally with the government, they would be able to sell in China. But everybody else in Europe and the United States would be screaming bloody murder. You have a government-funded thing coming over and competing with us. They wouldn't get very far, and people would see that, this was government. There's the government control aspect plus unfair competition. So instead, they got a group of people that were going to work there, engineers, and said, we're going to give you the money to start this. So Ren Zhengfei, the Chinese military guy that started, he gets a group of people, and he provides them money to start the company. They turn around and put that money back. He provided them the money based on the condition that they turn around and put it back into the company. And this is the start of a cycle. Now, when they put the money back into the company, that gives the company equity or capital. And then, just like happens in the Western world, when a company raises equity, they can go look into earn debt because they meet certain debt-to-equity ratios. So then the banks could put money in to match the equity. And then they could have a product, and then the Chinese government, for one, could buy a bunch of that product, and they could have some earnings. And they could, based on their earnings, they could then borrow more money from the bank. And then none of these earnings got paid out to their, quote, employee owners. They were all used to build up their capital base so they could borrow more. And when they didn't grow fast enough, and they were hiring other employees, then they found ways of giving the other employees money, again, on the condition that they put it back into the company and build the company's capital base so that they could inject more money from the banks. So they're over here. Here we are. We're just a small company that's growing very fast because we've got a great idea and competing and in a very short period of time putting our whole industry that was started here in the U.S. It used to be Lucent Technologies, Nortel, Motorola. And in 2001, 2002, 2003, those were your choices. There was Ericsson over in Sweden that was trying to compete. Nokia was trying to compete. They were very distant, fourth and fifth. No Chinese companies on the horizon. It was an industry controlled by U.S. firms because they developed all the technology for it. And within 8 or 9 years, they had put all of those companies out of business, or they had to be acquired by a foreign country. And they have, and so it starts with financing in that manner that I just described to you. And it continues with theft of the technology that's in place. So when we did get our first stuff from the Chinese people, and here's a couple other stories, when we did get our first technology from them, the base stations and whatnot, it came and you opened the cabinet up and it looked inside exactly like a Lucent cabinet. And in other iterations of the technology, we would see something that looked just like a Nortel thing or this. And there, at the same time, there was these stories about, Huawei personnel going to trade shows over here and running around, staying until after the trade show's done, and running around with a camera and taking pictures of everything and whatnot. And certainly the stuff, it looked like that was going on, but we wouldn't repeat that here and confirm that if we hadn't come across the situation ourselves where we put our first network in down in El Centro, California with Huawei, and they would have their people working in the switch room, and we got along with them great, and the people that were coming over seemed to be fine people, but out in back of our switch room we had a tower that we had built, and we had a lot of other carriers like Verizon, a company called Alamosa TCS was on there, and that had different technology. We were deploying Lucent, some of them were deploying Nortel, and some of them were deploying Ericsson. And one of those companies, Alamosa, asked us to do them a favor and swap out a card that went in their cabinet. They sent it down to us. They sent us the key to the cabinet. We went out to do that, and a number of the Huawei personnel were out on break having cigarettes. And we went over to the cabinet, opened it up. They immediately grabbed their cameras and came over and just started taking pictures.
Oh, wow.
And, we shut it and said, look, hey, what the heck's going on here? And we just commented amongst ourselves. This just isn't right. But, we had tried to do what we tried to do and say this wasn't a good idea. And we were pretty pregnant at that point with Huawei. So we went down the road and we deployed their technology. We had some success in areas, and then we went further. But the first pin of what I would say is unfair competition is the way they finance their companies. The second is, the theft of our technologies that they built the technology base on very quickly. And, there's certainly other aspects to that as well, and that is that the government is basically directing their activities, and, whatever it takes, we'll provide it for you to go in there and take over this industry or that industry. And so they're picking off these industries. When you have a dispute with them, which we ended up having with both those companies, it's the government of China that's writing checks for the premier law firms over here that are all too happy to get involved on their behalf. And if you're a small company, you're matching checkbooks with the government of China. And that's where we end up in the situation of our companies in competition or having to deal in business with their government.
Eric, we're going to cut into a commercial break, but before we go to the commercial break, I want to ask you, just so we can clarify when we come back from commercial break, the timeline. When you said you started first started as a construction company, yours, from 96 to 99, and that's when you guys started building towers. And then I want to know when... We went in 1999, up our first network we launched. And we thought we could do that because we worked for these other companies and we kind of saw what was going on. But we didn't really know until we went and bought spectrum from the government. We made arrangements to buy some equipment and go do it ourselves. So it was purely an entrepreneurial thing. And we went up to Grand Junction, Colorado, where at that time there was 3 communication sites, cell towers, if you will. And within 6 months, we put in 41 sites and
had, and but as was always our Achilles heel, we couldn't get the nicest phones. But for all the working people in Grand Junction, they all came to our service, and we provided the first unlimited plan where you didn't have. Back then, you had to pay by the minute. You had a basket of minutes maybe with somebody. So we provided $89 unlimited service at that time when, the equivalent, we had some people using our service a lot because it was unlimited, and we tried to put them on billboards and say, this person paid us $89. If they were on AT&T, they would have spent $3,500. If they were on, that's the amount of savings that we were creating for people at that time. In that time frame, and then we went on to other areas like Jackson, Tennessee, and we did the same thing, built networks there, and we launched that thing at $29 unlimited, and we kept it $29 unlimited until 2014 when we had to shut it down. So, over that time, it started out with just voice services, but we had to add text, we had to add picture mail, we had data. So by the time we were done, we had true $29. You didn't have to have 5 people on a family plan, and had truly unlimited data. And our call, drop, and block statistics, we published them on our website, and we put them on billboards because we felt that they were better than anybody else in the industry, and nobody else would publish theirs. So we really couldn't tell if that was a fact. But we had heard from other people what other companies' block and drop statistics were, and we thought we had the best quality network for certainly the lowest price.
Okay, so then this was between 99 and 2003, right? Right before.
Well, from 99 to 2000, from 99 to 2003, we were operating with Lucent equipment. From 2003 forward, we operated with some Lucent equipment, but that's when we had Huawei equipment. In 2006, I think we did our first network with ZTE. So we had those other providers, but we stayed in operation until about 2013 and ended up shutting our networks down in about 2014. And at that point in time, we had been operating in like 12 different states, and some big markets like St. Louis and Jacksonville, and again, a lot of small markets like El Centro, California, Jackson, Dyersburg, Tennessee, Grand Junction, Colorado, Pocatello, Twin Falls, Idaho Falls, Idaho. We were in, summer escaping Yuma, Arizona, and through some affiliates, Lubbock, Texas, Amarillo, Texas, and some of the areas around there, Brownsville, Texas, that type of stuff. So those are primarily the areas we were operating. And then the last area that we built out and operated when we really felt the effects of the government giving phones to our customer was about 2/3 of the state of South Carolina, what they call the central state and upstate regions of South Carolina, Greenville, Spartanburg, Anderson, Columbia, those areas.
So, and I asked that because it seems like a fast development at some point with this happening, like from the United States being in total control to kind of getting involved with Chinese business, and it developed fairly quickly, I would say. Would you say that, Eric?
Well, we were known for that, and that's why the companies, the existing companies who were our competitors, still have us building networks for them. We certainly would launch a network in a fraction of the time anybody else would launch a network, and even during that time, our competitors asked us to, we were competing in Jacksonville with Metro PCS at that time. They still asked us to deploy their network in Riverside and San Bernardino counties, for instance. So we did that sort of in our spare time. And we had been at it for a while, and the stuff that went into putting up a phone network and a phone cell service company, we had down pretty well, and we're pretty efficient at it.
Okay, so we're going to go into a commercial break now, and then when we come back, we're going to talk about the Inland Empire and why this is important, and what supervisor is also doing or trying to do some type of business with China. Is that fair to say, Tom? Is it fair to say it that way?
I would say facilitate.
Okay.
Business. Yeah.
Well, we'll have more here at U-Turn Radio. Don't change the dial.
We'll be right back to U-Turn after this commercial break. Don't go away.
Meet a friend, fall in love, save a life. Yucaipa Animal Placement Society is a nonprofit pet rescue facility for cats and dogs. Come and meet the wonderful homeless pets and be the person that makes all the difference to a pet in need. For more info, call 909-790-1440 or visit their website, yaps.org. That's yaps.org. The Humane Society of San Bernardino Valley, protecting animals for more than 4 decades. The Humane Society's mission is to prevent cruelty and neglect to animals and to provide for the health and well-being of animals with an emphasis on spay or neuter programs to prevent pet overpopulation. Visit the Humane Society of San Bernardino Valley for your pet's medical needs. 909-386-1400 or visit hssbv.org. The Humane Society of San Bernardino Valley, a leading nonprofit organization in caring for all animals in need.
How would you feel if you had to make a choice between buying food or spending your fixed income on life-saving medicine? No one should make that trade-off, but many low-income seniors are forced into difficult decisions like this every day. Smiles for Seniors Foundation provides energy assistance and safety net services to struggling low-income seniors in the Inland Empire. They provide one-time assistance to seniors to meet specific financial needs. They've helped with food, housing, utility payments, minor home and auto repairs, along with life-saving prescriptions or medical equipment. A nonprofit foundation funded entirely by donations from local organizations. Smiles for Seniors receives no funding from the state or federal government. They are funded by local businesses and individuals like you with big hearts and willing wallets. You can find more information or to donate to Smile for Seniors at 909-790-6671. That's 909-790-6671 or visit smilesforseniorsfoundation.org. That's smilesforseniorsfoundation.org.
Tom, Nadia, and Eric are back with more only on the U-Turn radio show right here on KCAA.
Welcome back to U-Turn Radio. We are covering China versus Inland Empire. Is business with China played on a level field? Pretty much we're covering kind of like different business ethics. We have Eric, which is our co-host, but he is in the industry that we are actually covering today, which is phone towers and how pretty much how it went from being in a company or being more United States controlled back in around 99, and then the Chinese came and started kind of getting involved, and then it's been a development since then to pretty much with tools, cheaper labor, right? Would we say that?
Well, I think the key takeaways that I heard in Eric's thing was particularly the issue of company ownership and the building of equity. That's
right.
huge. You know, if you're starting off from ground zero in terms of dollars, and you got to build a business, that would be taco, time to taco,
right,
or Fade,
downtown Fades, which are local businesses here in the Inland Empire.
They gotta pay all that stuff, and they gotta pay themselves, and all that time. So equity is huge, or cash equity, dollars is huge. And if you're competing against a company that's being backed in dollars,
right,
by the government, and forced, if you will, by the government to reinvest profits or dividends, United States go public, you reinvest, but you also got to satisfy the shareholders. That might mean a dividend, so that's money that's taken away, if you will, and you can't use in your business.
Yeah, and you got to make a profit in order to keep a flow of capital if you want to expand. And over there, they would generate their profits by doing transactions with the government of China to build phone networks in China at whatever rate, at whatever amount would allow it to show profits on their books. So they kept going and saying, we expanded this much. And there's, in the U.S., companies will say, we project that we're going to increase our sales 5 or 10% this year. And in China, these companies would say, we're going to, and they would, and it would be exactly what it was, because they would just, that's how many orders they would get from the government of China, just to show that. So they made it all look like it was, organic growth, but it was just the government of China behind them. Now, ZTE was more direct. They didn't claim to be an employee-owned company. They said they were a publicly traded company, and they had some of their stock on a public exchange. But and I can't say the majority because they would never say. And in fact, the federal government has asked them, and they won't tell the federal government how much. They will say that they are in part owned by an agency of the government of China directly, and they won't say how much. But I suspect that a lot. And from our experience,
more than 50%.
Someone over there is definitely calling the shots without a doubt. So you don't, and they try to set up a U.S. subsidiary over here and try and make it seem like that's a real independent company, but then things happen like, the CEO resigns or something of their U.S. subsidiary, and they don't have a new CEO for a year because they haven't appointed one in China. And then after they appoint one in China, he has to stay there for another 2 months past the Chinese New Year or something like that. And if you're me and your agreement says that you'll sit down face to face to work out any problems with their CEO, and they don't even have one, that type of thing certainly presents a problem.
What were the biggest challenges for you guys, Eric?
In working with the Chinese?
Yeah.
I would say that there were some parts of it actually that went well, and we got along pretty good, and their equipment, for the parts it worked well. However, and I think this may have something to do with what the U.S. government's having a problem that's all over the news with them on. There are certain platforms that they would not provide us, and they would not allow domestic platforms. So when you put a switch up, a telecommunications switch, you have to hook that to the outside world, and you have to hook it to the outside world for your picture mail. You have to have a picture mail server that gets that stuff off your cell phone system, puts it out on the internet. Same thing for internet sessions. They have to be hooked up. Long distance sessions have to be hooked up to other long distance carriers. You want to complete a call to other cell phone carriers, that has to go through a roaming server and that type of stuff. Well, their equipment would not hook up to certain platforms, or it was required to hook up to certain platforms. And if there was any change in doing that, the technology, and they would have to go and they'd have to have a big to-do in China and then come up with a whole other piece of equipment to do it. They couldn't do things to correct your problems in that regard on the fly. So, with ZTE, that created a situation where we couldn't offer our customers picture mail when everybody else was offering them picture mail. And they tried to say, well, that's not that big a deal anyway. We sell networks to, Bangladesh and Sri Lanka and Thailand, and they don't have their picture mail yet either, and it's not a problem. And it's like they're the only system there, and they're not competing with 4 other carriers. We need our picture mail, and our customers are going to view us differently, and that's not what we bought, and so they would just stonewall us. And I have my suspicion it had a lot to do with their control over the architecture, because if it was a U.S. network, we would be able to go to outside providers and get them to work with our system. They're a lot more interactive, but everything had to be manufactured and programmed in the software written by China in their thing, and so that was a big part of the historic problem. Another thing is the business practices are much different. They don't believe in I guess the ethics are different, because we believe in the way we are able to do what we need to do is you hire somebody and you give them a job to do, and you give them the tools, and you get out of the way, and you don't interfere. And they asked us to sell to other customers for them, for instance, and we agreed to do that. And then they got their people and started jumping in there first, interfering, and we told them, hey, this is not working for us, so we backed off and said, go sell yourself. later on, they came back, and this was during the time that the government was trying to stimulate the economy, and they were giving away a bunch of money to provide some phone services to certain rural companies around the country who could use the Huawei gear, and we were the people that were using it and making it work. So those companies came to us and wanted to buy. So then again, Huawei approached us to do this again, and we got emphatic promises that they would not interfere with what we were doing again, and we went ahead with it, and they couldn't help themselves. As soon as we started generating sales, they started sending their own salespeople into what were supposed to be our customers and working around us, and so we had the second falling out. It was quite a bit bigger with them. It was at that time. It was, certainly, we're not going to be doing this, squirrel whale with you. So
let's bring this into local and kind of talk through it a little bit. So you had. We've kind of discussed, if you will, the playing field and what it looks like, and I would say it doesn't sound, certainly in this case, level. So doing a little research in 2016, there's an article in The Sun, and essentially it's kind of trumpeting this effort by now 4th District Supervisor Kurt Hagman, who, as an assemblyman in the state legislature, he traveled to China quite a bit from 2018 to 2014. I believe he's continued to make those trips. But the article kind of talked about, the potential growth in the local area, particularly over at Ontario Airport, by bringing in Chinese businesses. And it was like, okay, China Airlines is going to, start flying into Ontario. The representative from China was stated that they were going to form a U.S.-based company to handle a venture that might include construction of new buildings, new international terminal, upgrade of terminals, and some hotels, restaurants, that type of thing. Kind of a, if you will, a makeover of the Ontario airport area.
Let me talk about that a little bit. I mean, and I was just recently in St. Kitts, an island, just a small island in the Caribbean, and the Chinese are over there investing, and they're gone. There's some there's some colleges that educate medical school and I think an architecture school or something that have mostly U.S. students in them. And those people need housing over there, and lo and behold, there's a bunch of Chinese people that came over there to build housing. And the people on the island looked at it and said, "Hey, this would be great. They're gonna come over here and finance some of that, and they're gonna provide jobs for us." But they got with the local politicians there and got it passed so that they could bring their own people. So they brought people from China over. No local jobs. There's a lot of animosity on it. Take that and look at what's going on in the Inland Empire. They believe, and it works for them in most every other part of the world, that if they can get to politicians and buy influence, they can get what they want, and what they want is their own economies to advance and jobs for their people, which you would expect they would want. And so they are. It's not just the people in the Inland Empire. They're as we travel around the country and we talk to people and we read papers and whatnot, they're flying any politician from anywhere and everywhere just about over there first class and putting them up and ingratiating themselves to them, and they feel that that's going to pay dividends, and probably, given what I know, it will. So, but other than that, there's, I would say, not much reason for a supervisor in San Bernardino to be making constant trips over there to China. And I think we asked Kurt about that and didn't get any response. And then we did a Freedom of Information Act request on how many times he went over there, and he said that was his personal business. But, I mean, he wants to say he's got a full-time job, but you can't get to China and back on a weekend. And so,
right.
That's the problem. So, what happens is, just like other people, it's an influence type of thing that's going on here, and it's not good. The decisions for San Bernardino County are not necessarily being made in the best interest of San Bernardino County. Now, Kurt Hagman may think this is the wave of the future, but from my experience, it's not a productive thing for us to do more business in the current environment with China. And we need to basically go back to building our own stuff and doing our own things. And, what's going on right now is we're essentially trading, cheap tools and mini bikes for farmland. And you go across where we build these networks all over the country, and that's who you start seeing owning all the farms. And you get people in the bars saying, well, it's not a problem, they need our food. It ain't our food anymore. They own the farms. So, that's the problem that I see out of that whole approach of ingratiating yourself to China that we have here locally.
I mean, from listening to your story, Eric, and just from the research that we've done for this show, it's very interesting to me because you see the Chinese business really kind of taking over, because even in like the fashion world, clothes is made over in China, so we get it here a lot cheaper, and that's how it works, right?
This was Bill Clinton's magic formula to be a good president. He said he performed a financial miracle, which was, I turned the huge deficit into a surplus when he was there. And a lot of people think he's a great president just from the fact that he was able to do that financially. But he did it by letting China into the World Trade Organization at that time and opening the doors to this, which, because the goods coming from China are so cheap, that makes the inflation go way, way down. And when the inflation goes way, way down, the interest rate comes down. And at that time, government was paying interest rates of 7%, 8%, 9%. And, because the inflation went way down, the interest rates way down, and all of a sudden he's got a balanced budget and a surplus. But there's a cost for that. And it's, not us not making our stuff anymore. I'm in South Carolina right now, and, all the textile mills in South Carolina are closed, and all that stuff's being made overseas. And here they've done a really good job of getting jobs to replace that, and they have a really good coordinated effort to do that. But in the Inland Empire, you don't have that situation, and you got to realize that it's not an entrepreneurial thing where we're competing with the people in China or their companies. We're competing with the government of China, because they have chosen, and they've said, in these 15 industries, we're going to take them over and dominate them within the next 10 years. And that's the mandate, and they will put whatever money and resources in to do that. And so they're getting financed, they're getting supported, and they're being directed, this is what you're going to do. And if a region like the Inland Empire is going to compete, they pretty much have to, in this environment, pick industries that they have advantages in competing, and really start putting support behind them. And even the government needs to get on board in supporting those industries, not trying to run them through a ringer and permitting and stuff like that. That we have, there's just no way that I can tell you that small companies are going to go and be able to make it work, where they're just got to fight a war on all fronts, and you've got to compete with these self-directed entities that have all these advantages, including, at this point, unlimited financial resources and very low labor rates and a lax, pollution climate and stuff like that.
Well, what's more alarming? What's more alarming from the stuff that I read, Eric, is that now too the U.S. government is, they're concerned about hackers, because we almost kind of open the door for them to see everything and how everything's operated. They're creating everything. We're kind of relying on them. And now to even change it up, if we wanted to, at this point, it would cost so much money.
As far as hacking?
Like the towers, like with the phone towers. There's some other articles I was reading, how they're concerned about pretty much Chinese business or in the robot industry, hacking into those technologies that we're developing here. So it's just, I think, like beyond like the phone towers.
I'll give you one story on that kind of in closing, and that is there was these two companies, ZTE and Huawei from China, and they acted like they were in competition with each other. So I would, if we were deploying the different networks, I thought, well, if I'm doing business with these Chinese, it'd be better if I have two of them, and that way, I have a different place to go. And so I deployed some ZTE networks, and I deployed some Huawei networks. And then as new markets would come up, I would make decisions on whose equipment I would use, and they would have people that were charged with trying to sell me their equipment at these companies. And this happened, I don't know how many times, where I came close to signing a deal, and I basically, you're going back and forth on emails with drafts, and you say, okay, well, if you do this, that'll be okay. And when I would say, okay, well, that's okay, if you'd make these changes, I think I can sign this tomorrow, on at least 6 or 7 occasions that I can recall, the other company's representative would show up at my house or wherever I was across the country working.
What?
They would show up and say, hey, we've got to sell you this. And it just wasn't coincidence after a while. It's like, okay, they're reading my email.
Oh, wow. Yes.
And Eric is a hard man to track.
So that says a lot.
Right? Every time. And it was just so, I probably could have had some fun with it, but, I certainly think that, these stories about, their tracking of information probably have some substance to them, just on my own experience.
Right, so that pretty much is going to wrap it up for us here at U-Turn Radio. Interesting show. I really want to know what Mr. Hagman has involved, or what he's trying to do with China. But we didn't get an interview with him because that doesn't happen here. But we'll have more U-Turn next Thursday at 3 o'clock. See you next week.